The station Aurelius Prime floated in the dark between three star systems, like a jewel that someone had polished too much and left in the wrong place. It was enormous, beautiful, and full of aliens who did not want humans there. Staff Sergeant Darren Cole stood near the back wall of the Grand Ceremony Hall and tried not to look bored. He was 34 years old, built like someone had stacked hard years on top of each other, and dressed in the ceremonial uniform of the Earth Expeditionary Corps. His uniform was clean, his boots were shined, his knee hurt. He had been deployed to 6 planets across 11 years. He had survived things that most alien species had only read about in old war histories. He had been shot at, buried in rubble, and once dragged half a mile through alien jungle by a creature that did not have a name yet. He had survived all of it, and now he was standing at a wedding. The wedding was enormous. The ceremony hall inside Aurelius Prime could have swallowed 3 of Earth's largest stadiums. Thousands of aliens from 40 different civilizations filled the seats and the balconies and the upper galleries. There were tall bird-like creatures from the Vessan reaches, wearing silver feathers braided into formal patterns. There were the wide, slow-moving Dun, who communicated in low vibrations and had to wear translation collars that hummed constantly. There were Thessari nobles everywhere, in deep blue robes with gold at the collars and wrists, moving with the kind of calm confidence that came from centuries of ruling everything around them. At the center of all of it, Crown Princess Valith of the Thessari Empire stood beside her intended husband, Lord Kareth of the Morvi noble house. Cole had been briefed on him on the transport ship. Kareth was considered an excellent political match, a neutral house, clean reputation, acceptable bloodline, the kind of man that made sense on paper. Cole did not look at the ceremony much. He looked at the room. He looked at the doors. He looked at the guards. He looked at where the walls met the ceiling and where the light panels ran. He looked at the guest balconies on the eastern side, and then he looked again because something did not sit right. He leaned close to Lieutenant Commander Hessa, who stood beside him. Hessa was his superior officer on this escort assignment. She was also extremely tired of him already. The eastern balcony, Cole said quietly, 3rd section from the far wall. Those guests have not moved since we arrived. Not once. Not to look at the ceremony, not to talk to each other. Nobody stands that still at a wedding unless they are waiting for something. Hessa did not look Cole. Stand straight and stay quiet. We are here as courtesy escorts. We are representing Earth. Please do not embarrass Earth. Cole straightened. He stayed quiet. He kept watching the eastern balcony. The guests there were 15 in number. They wore the formal robes of the Karath noble house. They stood in positions that, if Cole had seen them in a combat briefing, he would have called a staggered coverage formation. 3 near the balcony rail, 2 at the entrance, 2 behind the first group, the rest filling the space in between. They were watching the room, not the wedding. They were not watching their lord be married. They were watching the exits. Cole counted the ceremonial guards posted around the hall. 42. He noted their weapons were decorative, long-handled and ornate, the kind that fired single-charge bursts and took 8 seconds to recycle. He noted the main power conduit ran along the eastern wall, visible behind a decorative screen. He noted there were 4 service corridor entrances hidden behind the tall hanging banners at intervals around the room. He filed all of it away and stood straight and stayed quiet, because Hessa had told him to. The ceremony reached the moment where the officiant, a tall Thessari elder with white marks across both temples, raised both hands and began to speak the words of the binding. The hall went very still, the kind of still that comes right before something important happens. And then the lights went out, not dimmed, not flickered, gone. The whole hall dropped into black so complete that Cole could not see his own hand for 1 full second before the emergency low strips along the floor activated and threw everything into dim red. Then the shooting started. It came from 3 places at once. It came from the eastern balcony, from behind the banners on the northern wall, and from the service corridor near the main entrance. The shots were not warning shots. They were not aimed at the ceiling. They were aimed at the Thessari royal guards first, fast and practiced, dropping them before they could raise their decorative weapons. The hall erupted. The thousands of alien guests did what most creatures do when sudden violence arrives. In a peaceful place, they screamed and ran. They pushed toward exits, knocked each other down, climbed over seats. The noise was enormous, and the red emergency light made everything look like the inside of a bad dream. Hessa grabbed Cole's arm. "We move to the ambassador. We get to the emergency shuttle. We go now." Cole was already moving, but not toward the ambassador. He was moving low, below the sightlines, toward the eastern balcony stairwell, toward the noise, toward the shooting. Hessa hissed at his back. Cole, that is a direct order." Cole did not stop. He had already counted the angles. He already knew which way the royal guards that were still standing would be pushed. He already knew where the shooting patterns left a gap. And somewhere in the front of that hall, in the chaos and the red light, Crown Princess Valith was still standing at the altar, because that is where the attack was directed. He moved through the crowd like water finding cracks. He went low and fast, and he did not hesitate once, because hesitation was a decision too, and he had already decided. The galaxy, had it been watching one soldier move through that panicked crowd in the wrong direction while everyone else ran, might have been confused. It might have asked why a Tier 3 human escort soldier was crawling toward a coup instead of away from it. The galaxy did not understand yet that for humans, this was simply what you did. Cole came around the base of the eastern stairwell and found the first attacker before the attacker found him. The man was Thessari, stripped of his noble house robes, now down to a close-fitting tactical layer with a charged weapon raised toward the ceremony floor. Cole did not give him time to turn. The fight lasted 4 seconds. Cole had the man's weapon and was moving again before the body finished falling. The hall was still loud with screaming and running, but the exits were beginning to clear as guests flooded out. Cole moved along the wall toward the ceremony floor and found what he had expected to find. The royal guards who had survived the first volley were clustered protectively around the wrong thing. They were protecting the ceremonial artifacts, the altar, the tradition of the space. They were not protecting the princess. Valith had been pulled behind the altar by one remaining guard, a broad-shouldered Thessari soldier with a gash across his left arm, who was holding a charge pistol in a two-handed grip and looking in too many directions at once. That was the guard named Softhal, though Cole did not know his name yet. Cole came in low from the right side, and Softhal nearly shot him. "Human," Cole said clearly, with both hands visible. "Earth Expeditionary Corps. I am not with them. I need to get the princess to the inner sanctum right now." Softhal stared at him. The guard's eyes moved to Cole's borrowed weapon, to his uniform, to the direction Cole had come from. "You came from the eastern stairwell," Softhal said. "Yes. The eastern stairwell is where they came from. I know. I came through them." A pause. Softhal looked at the body Cole had left behind the stairwell base, visible in the red emergency light. The man said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "The inner sanctum is 3 corridors north and 1 corridor west. The doors are 2-inch reinforced Thessari alloy. Nothing short of a cutting tool gets through them." "Then that is where she needs to be," Cole said. "Right now." Behind the altar, Crown Princess Valith was already standing. She had not been cowering. She had been listening. Her blue robes were torn at the shoulder, and her formal headpiece was gone. Eyes were sharp and direct. She looked at Cole with the expression of someone who was collecting information very fast. "You are the human escort," she said. "Staff Sergeant Darren Cole." "Yes, Your Highness. Let's move." They moved. The 3 of them went fast and low through the ceremony hall, using the panicked remaining guests as cover, then into the corridor beyond. Cole led because he had memorized the layout from the briefing documents that everyone else on the escort team had used as a sleeping aid on the transport. In the corridors, 2 more attackers. They were not expecting someone coming toward them from inside the hall. Cole dealt with the first one before the man raised his weapon, and Softhal dealt with the second one, wounded arm and all. 3 corridors north, 1 corridor west, The inner sanctum doors were exactly as described. Softhal pressed his guard seal to the panel, and the doors opened, and all three of them went through, and the doors sealed behind them with a sound like the whole galaxy locking out. In the silence of the inner sanctum, Valak sat on the ceremonial bench and pressed her hands flat on her knees. The room was small and lit with warm standing lamps, and it smelled like some kind of incense that Cole did not have a name for. Softhal immediately moved to the wall panel to check the station comm lines. Cole moved to the door and stood facing it, weight even, weapon ready. Valith watched the human soldier for a moment. "You moved toward the fighting," she said. "When everyone else ran, you moved toward it." "Yes." "Why?" Cole considered the question. He did not answer immediately, which was itself an answer of a kind. Then he said, "Because someone needed to, and I could." Valith was quiet for a moment. "My people have not fought a real war in 200 years, she said. "We have guards and protocol, and we have ceremonies around the idea of protection. But we have not actually bled for anything in a very long time." "I noticed," Cole said. Softhal turned from the comm panel. His expression was not good. "The coup leader is broadcasting station-wide," the guard said. "His name is Rethka Vaughn, operational commander for the Vreth Syndicate. He is saying that if the princess does not surrender within 1 hour, he will trigger the station core overload. There are 40,000 people on this station." The room was very quiet. Cole did not move from the door. He said, "Tell me everything you know about Rethka Vaughn, and I will tell you how we are going to get out of this." Valith and Softhal looked at each other. Then they looked at the human soldier standing at their door, like the door had personally offended him, and he was waiting to explain why. And they started talking. What followed over the next 20 minutes was not a formal briefing. It was a soldier asking fast questions, and a princess and her guard answering faster than they thought they could. Valith knew the Vreth Syndicate from political reports. She knew Rethka Vaughn's name. She knew which noble houses had been in communication with the Kareth house over the last year, and which of those communications had felt strange to her court advisors. Cole listened to all of it, with the same expression he wore when reading terrain maps. Outside the sanctum doors, the sounds of the station filtered through faintly, distant shouting, the hum of security systems trying to restore order, the occasional sharp crack of a charge weapon being fired somewhere in the upper levels. Cole stood at the door and thought. The Vreth Syndicate wanted the princess. They wanted her alive, because a dead princess created a martyr and a political disaster. But a captured princess in their custody created leverage. They were not trying to kill her, they were trying to corner her. Which meant Rethka Vaughn needed to talk. He needed to negotiate. That was a door. Cole turned from the doorway. He looked at Valith directly, and said, "I am going to go talk to him." Softhal made a sound that in Thessari communication meant absolute disagreement expressed at volume. Valith said nothing for a moment. She was looking at Cole with the expression she had worn in the ceremony hall, the one that collected information fast. She said, "What do you expect to get from talking to him?" "Time," Cole said, "and I want to see the broadcast chamber with my own eyes." "He is going to see through any negotiation," Valith said. "A simple man." "I know," Cole said. "I am not planning to negotiate." She looked at him steadily for 3 full seconds. Then she said, "Tell me exactly what you need from me." Cole told her, and for the first time since the lights had gone out in the grand ceremony hall, something shifted in the room. It was not hope exactly. It was something more solid than hope. It was a plan. Rethka Vaughn had planned this for 3 years. He was patient by nature, which was unusual for someone in the Vreth Syndicate, where patience was considered a weakness unless it produced results. 3 years of placing people inside the Karath noble house. 3 years of working Lord Karath from a useful ally into a willing front. 3 years of mapping the security of Aurelius Prime and counting the guards, and noting which ones were ceremony trained and which ones had ever actually been in a fight. The answer to that last question had been 0. Nobody on Aurelius Prime had ever actually been in a fight. Not a real one. Not the kind where the other side knew what it was doing. He had not planned for a human. In the main broadcast chamber, Rethka sat in the command seat he had taken from the station's communications director, and listened to his field team's reports. The princess was sealed in the inner sanctum. That was expected. The sanctum doors were holding. That was also expected. He had a cutting team working on it. The estimated breach time was 40 minutes. What was not expected was the count of his own people who had stopped reporting in. 2 from the eastern balcony team, 1 from the corridor sweep, 3 from the outer hall positions. The numbers kept coming in wrong, and the common factor in all of them was the same corridor origin point, and nobody could explain it clearly, except one survivor who kept saying, "The human, it was the human," in a tone that Rethka found difficult to process. When the comm request came through from the inner sanctum, Rethka expected the princess. He was prepared for that conversation. He had a speech ready. The voice that came through was not the princess. "This is Staff Sergeant Darren Cole, Earth Expeditionary Corps," the voice said in flat, clear galactic standard. "I am currently with the Crown Princess, and I would like to propose a conversation." Rethka leaned forward. "You are the human escort soldier." "That is correct." "You want to negotiate?" "I want to talk, yes. That is different from negotiating, but the word does not matter." Rethka was quiet for a moment. He turned to the 2 advisors seated beside him, and they both made the gesture that meant, "This is interesting. Proceed." "Should I agree to talk to a Tier 3 species escort soldier when I have 40,000 lives as leverage and a cutting team on the sanctum door?" The human said, "Because your cutting team is going to find the door harder than they expected, your timeline is off by about 20 minutes. And talking to me in the broadcast chamber looks better to the 40 civilizations currently watching this feed than talking to nobody while a timer counts down. I am also genuinely curious about the architecture in there, and I would like water, if that is possible." Rethka stared at the comm panel. Then he laughed once, short and real, because in 3 years of planning, he had not once laughed at anything, and the human had managed it in 4 sentences. "Come to the broadcast chamber," Rethka said, "alone and unarmed. If you bring a weapon, I will know, and you will not enjoy the result." Cole came alone. He was unarmed. He walked through the corridor checkpoints with his hands visible, and when Rethka's guards patted him down, they found nothing. He walked into the broadcast chamber and looked around at the space with the calm eyes of someone taking inventory. He noted the 4 guards at the door. He noted the 2 advisors. He noted the positions of the comm panels and the power strips along the floor, and the maintenance access hatch near the left wall that had a slightly different color of dust on it than the rest of the floor, meaning it had been opened recently. He sat in the chair across from Rethka and put his hands on the table. Rethka looked at him directly. "You are not afraid." "I have been afraid every single day for 14 years, Cole said. "I stopped letting it make my decisions." "That is a very human answer." "Probably." What followed was 41 minutes of conversation. Rethka talked because he was proud of the plan, and because the broadcast was live, and he wanted the galaxy to understand what the Vreth Syndicate was capable of. And because the human kept asking small, calm questions that led him to explain more than he intended. Cole talked about Earth. He talked about the weather in a place called Montana. He asked about the station's original architects. He complimented the ceiling paneling. He asked for water twice, and received it once. Threats, and no demands, and never once raised his voice. He was also counting. He was counting guard rotation times. He was counting the distance from the maintenance hatch to the primary comm relay. He was counting the seconds between Rethka's sentences when the man checked the cutting team progress, which told him the timeline. At 37 minutes, Cole asked Rethka what had made him choose the Vreth Syndicate over legitimate political routes. And Rethka, who had been waiting for someone important to ask this question for most of his adult life, began to answer in the full detail of a man who believed he was being heard. At 39 minutes, Cole asked if he could have a second glass of water. At 41 minutes, When the small signal came through on the translation collar Cole wore, 3 short vibrations, meaning in position. Cole said, "Could I ask one more question?" Rethka said, "You may." Cole said, "What made you think this was going to work?" And then he pressed the collar control that triggered the maintenance override code that Softhal had given him before Cole left the sanctum. The code that when entered into any Aurelius Prime maintenance relay triggered a full station emergency lighting reset, which killed every active electronic lock on the station for 11 seconds. The sanctum doors opened. Valith walked out with Softhal and the 8 loyalist guards who had been gathering in the service corridor behind the sanctum wall for the last 30 minutes. Every cell door on the station popped open. Every sealed room became accessible. Every Vreth operative who had locked themselves into a secured position found themselves in an unlocked room with very angry station security, suddenly able to reach them. Rethka stood up fast. Cole was already on the other side of the table. He was very quick for someone with a bad knee. The broadcast chamber caught everything. The 40 civilizations watching the feed saw the whole sequence. They saw the human talk for 41 minutes. They saw the moment Rethka realized he had been used as a distraction in his own coup. They saw Rethka Von, operational commander of the Vreth Syndicate's most ambitious political operation, get zip-tied with his own ceremonial sash by a Tier 3 escort soldier who then asked a nearby guard if there was anywhere on the station with decent food. It was, by every measure, the most watched broadcast in Aurelius Prime history. Cole sat on a crate in the outer corridor of the broadcast wing and ate a protein bar from his jacket pocket. His knee hurt. His shoulder hurt in a place he had not noticed hurting during the fighting, which was normal. He had filed his mental after-action report 3 times already. He was ready to go home. He was not going to go home. The first person to find him in that corridor was Ambassador Terrace, the Earth diplomat who had been evacuated to the emergency shuttle deck and had spent the last 2 hours being professionally terrified. Terrace was a small man with large glasses and the expression of someone who had expected a quiet assignment. "Cole," Terrace said, "there are 43 requests for statements from galactic news organizations. I need you to tell me exactly what you did and in what order, so I can brief the Earth Council before they see the broadcast." "I can write that up," Cole said. "You are going to need to also explain why you disobeyed a direct order from Lieutenant Commander Hessa." "I can write that up too." Terrace sat down on a nearby surface that was not quite meant for sitting and rubbed his face. "The Thessari Imperial Court has already sent a formal communication to our embassy," he said. "They want to speak with you directly, not with me, specifically you." Cole looked at him. "What for?" Terrace said. "Something called the Right of Aegis. I am having it translated now, but the early reading is not simple." The full translation arrived 2 hours later in a formal document with the Thessari Imperial seal on it, and it was, as Terrace had predicted, not simple. The Right of Aegis was one of the oldest laws in Thessari civilization. It had been written before the Thessari reached space, back when they were still a ground-bound empire fighting real wars on real soil. It said that any person who placed their life between a member of the Crown and fatal danger, during a documented attack, in a witness setting, was formally bound to the Crown by a protection oath. The oath was not a suggestion, it was law. It had never been repealed because no Thessari ruler had ever thought it necessary to repeal a thing that had not been used in 400 years. Cole read the document twice. He said. "So I am legally obligated to serve the Thessari crown." In a simplified reading, yes. "I am a staff sergeant in the Earth Expeditionary Corps. You are also, according to this document, currently the highest-ranked non-Thessari individual in the Thessari Imperial System." Cole put the document down. He looked at the wall for a long time. Terrace said quietly, "The Earth Council has already been informed. The early message from the Council is that this is complicated, but also the single largest political development in Earth's history of galactic relations, and that we should not do anything to damage it. They want me to stay. They want you to be very careful, and also yes, they want you to stay. Cole picked the document back up. He read it a third time. He was looking for a way out, and not finding one. He was also, and he would not have said this out loud to anyone, finding something in the document that was not entirely unwelcome. It was the section that described what the right of Aegis actually allowed its holder to do. It was not a servitude oath. It was a protection bond, which was different. The holder did not serve the crown. They stood beside it. The holder had the right to speak in any court session, to challenge any noble motion, to enter any secured space in the empire without prior clearance, and to refuse any order that the holder determined to be a direct threat to the crown's safety. It was not a leash. It was a seat at the table. Crown Princess Valith came to find him herself that evening. She walked into the outer corridor, with 2 guards, and without announcement, and sat in the chair that Terrace had dragged in from somewhere. She wore plain Thessari clothes with no gold at the collar, and she looked like someone who had also been thinking for several hours. "You understand what the right means," she said. "I read the document," Cole said. "I want to be clear about how I intend to invoke it," she said. "I am not looking for a bodyguard. I have guards. The Thessari Empire has an army. I do not need another soldier. I have been surrounded by soldiers my entire life, and this is the first time in my life that a soldier has ever actually done anything useful." Cole said nothing, which was a kind of answer. "I am looking for someone who sees rooms the way you see rooms," Valith said. "Someone who looks at a political situation and finds the service corridors and the maintenance hatches and the unlocked doors that everyone else has stopped noticing because they have been looking at the ceremony for too long." She leaned forward. "I was raised inside this system, and inside systems, the walls look like floors. I need someone who can see the walls for what they are." Cole looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "What does the job pay?" Valith looked at him, and then, for the first time since the lights went out in the ceremony hall, she smiled. The formal investiture took place 4 days later, in the Thessari Imperial Court, on the capital station of Thessari Prime. Cole stood in the Great Hall, in ceremonial Thessari armor, that had been fitted for a human frame by the court tailors, who had clearly never fitted armor for a human frame before, and had done their best. He scanned the room the way he always scanned rooms. He noted the positions of the noble house representatives. He noted who was watching Valith, and who was watching him, and who was watching the doors. He noted 3 nobles in particular, who had looked away too quickly when Valith spoke the formal words of the rite. That was the kind of look that meant something. He filed it. The title of Aethon, Protector Lord of the Crown, was conferred in the Old Language first, and then in Galactic Standard, so the record was clear. The hall was silent throughout. The kind of silence that meant the room was absorbing something it had not expected and had not prepared for. Cole stood straight during the ceremony. His knee hurt. He was used to that. After the ceremony, Terrace found him in a side corridor and said, "I need you to understand what just happened in there." Cole said, "I understand. You are the first non-Thessari Aethon in 400 years. You have formal standing in Imperial Court that outranks most ambassadors. You are going to have every noble house in the Empire watching every move you make and trying to find the angle." "Good," Cole said. "Then they will be watching me instead of the princess." Iz stared at him for a moment. Then the small ambassador said, "You know, I came on this assignment because I was told it would be simple." Cole almost smiled. He said, "It usually starts that way." 3 months after the wedding that was not a wedding, Darren Cole woke at 5 in the morning in a room that was too large and too decorated, and ran drills alone in the wide corridor outside his chamber door, while the palace staff of Thessari Prime pretended not to watch. He was bad at the formal dances. He was bad at the 16 forms of greeting that ranked by noble house and occasion. He was bad at the long ceremonial meals that lasted 4 hours and required 17 pieces of flatware. He was very good at everything else. He had learned the names of every noble house in the Thessari Imperial Court within the first 2 weeks. He had learned which ones were old money and which ones were new titles. He had learned which court officials talked too much at dinners, and which ones said almost nothing, and which ones asked questions that were very precisely not about what they sounded like they were about. He had mapped the whole court the way he would map a building. He had found the corridors. The three nobles he had flagged during the investiture ceremony were named Voshari, Lethan, and a woman called Kadera Sane, who ran the Imperial Agricultural Commission, and had, Cole eventually determined, been routing Vreth syndicate payments through grain contract ledgers for 2.5 years. It was an extremely clever system, and Cole had found it in 6 weeks by reading shipping documents late at night, in the way he used to read terrain maps before deployments. Voshari was removed from court after his communication records were quietly reviewed. Lethan resigned before anyone asked him to. Kadera Sane, when confronted by Valith in a private session with the evidence Cole had assembled, made a decision Cole had not expected. She flipped. She provided names and dates and transaction records for 17 other Vreth-connected individuals inside the Empire, in exchange for a reduced status reduction rather than full removal. Cole had not expected the flip. He had planned for denial. He told Valith afterward that he had prepared the wrong scenario, and she told him that in Thessaly court politics, the flip was actually more common than it looked, because noble houses prioritize survival above almost everything else. "I am learning," Cole said. "You are learning faster than anyone I have seen learn this court," Valith said. "I grew up in a system where being slow to learn got people killed," Cole said. The lesson stuck. The galactic response to Cole's presence in Thessaly court had been, in diplomatic terms, a mess. The Tier 1 civilizations had sent formal queries through their ambassadors, asking for clarification of his status. They had expected the human to be quietly absorbed, given a ceremonial title with no real weight, and kept away from anything important. Instead, Cole was in every strategy session. He was the first person Valith asked when a situation felt wrong. He had already reshaped 3 court protocols based on what he identified as security vulnerabilities in the old procedures. And he was, to the visible frustration of several senior noble advisors, almost impossible to manipulate, because he did not want anything. He did not want land. He did not want titles. He did not want wealth. He wanted Valith's empire to be stable and her court to be honest, and the people doing their jobs to actually do their jobs. The noble houses had spent generations managing people who wanted things. They did not know how to manage someone who only wanted the work to be right. The formal challenge came at a full conclave dinner, the kind of event where 40 civilizations sent representatives and everyone wore their best, and the speeches went long. The Tier 1 ambassador from the Vessin reaches, a tall bird creature named Sorrel, who wore silver rank feathers down to the floor, made a motion during the formal address period. Sorrel stood and said in Galactic Standard that the presence of a Tier 3 species representative in a formal imperial court role without conclave approval represented a structural irregularity that needed to be addressed, and that the conclave should open a review. The room went quiet in the specific way rooms go quiet when everyone is waiting to see what happens next. Cole was seated at the Thessaly imperial table on the left side, which was the Aethon position. He had been looking at his plate. He looked up. Valith's hand was near the formal response bell, which meant she was going to respond officially. Cole put his hand flat on the table and shook his head once. She leaned back. Cole stood up. He did not use the formal address tone. He used the tone of someone who has thought about something carefully and is now saying it out loud clearly. He said, "The Thessaly Rite of Aegis was 400 years old, and predated the current conclave structure by 2 centuries. He said his presence in the Thessaly imperial court was a matter of Thessaly sovereign law, and did not require external review, any more than any other civilization's internal legal structure required external review. He said the Vessin reaches would not welcome a conclave motion to review the Vessin hereditary succession laws, and he assumed the same courtesy was being extended equally." He sat down. Sorrel looked at him for a long moment. The tall ambassador then said that this was a reasonable structural argument, and that the motion would be withdrawn pending further legal review, which was the diplomatic way of saying, It was gone. The vote on Earth's Tier 1 status came 6 weeks later. Valith had spent those 6 weeks in diplomatic meetings, calling in debts and making new ones, and having conversations in the long political language of the court that Cole was still learning. The vote was not easy. It was close. It was the kind of vote where the final count came in 3 pieces, over 2 hours. It passed. Earth was Tier 1. In the small reception after the formal announcement, Cole stood near the back of the Thessari Imperial Room with a glass of something that was not quite like any drink Earth made, and watched the diplomats move around each other in the patterns of people who were already recalculating what the new structure meant for them. Terrace came and stood beside him. The small ambassador looked at the room, and then looked at Cole and said, "Do you understand what happened today?" "Yes," Cole said. "You should feel something about it." "I feel things about it," Cole said. "I'm just not loud about it." He was thinking about his squad from the 4th deployment. He was thinking about a woman named Reyes, who had been the best navigator he had ever served with, and who had died on a cold moon, far from home. He was thinking about a man named Park, who had laughed at everything, even the bad things, and who had not come back from the 5th deployment. He was thinking about all the people who had done the hard work in the dark, and never been in a room like this. That night, Cole stood alone on the wide balcony off the Imperial wing of Thessari Prime, and looked at the stars. The palace behind him was warm and lit, and full of voices. Of him was the same dark it had always been, full of distances that took generations to cross. Valith came out and stood beside him without speaking for a while. Then she said, "What are you thinking about?" He told her about Reyes and Park. He told her a few names and a few small things, the kind of details that do not make it into any official record. Valith listened. She said, "They would have found this absurd. All of this. A soldier in an imperial court." Cole almost smiled. "Yeah," he said, "they would have loved it." The wind off the landing platform moved through the night around them, and the stars did not move the way they did from Earth. But they were still stars, and the dark between them was still the same dark it had always been. He had come to a royal wedding as an escort, a Tier 3 footnote, told to stand straight and stay quiet. He had walked out as Aethon of the Thessari Crown, and he had walked Earth into the highest tier of galactic civilization, not because he was chosen, and not because he was the most powerful thing in the room, but because when the lights went out, he had moved toward the problem the way he always had. The way humans always did, not because they were fearless, but because they had learned a long time ago on a hard world that fear was not a reason to stop. He had done what he could with what he had, and it had been enough. It was almost always enough.